I'm Edie Lush, and I'm here inside the Hub Culture Studio, Davos 2023. Really pleased to be here with a couple of fantastic gentlemen. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Bunmi and Chris.
Yeah, thanks.
So we're going to talk a little bit about this idea of Web3 and particularly dive into the idea of stable coins, which is one of the conversations that we've had in Hub Culture over the last couple of years. Let's get right to it, if you will. Bunmi, tell me, what do you think when you think about stable coins? What kind of currency peg do you think should be the most important one to consider?
Absolutely. I mean, really, at this point, especially when you think about the African continent, issuing stable coins by government, I mean, really innovative ideas. But the big challenge is, what is it pegged to? Is it pegged to your local currency? Is it pegged to the US dollar? Is it pegged to euro or to the Chinese yuan? I really think that the correct answer is that it should be a mix. It really should be a diversified, mix of currencies.
So like a basket.
Like a basket, absolutely. Especially thinking about who your trading partners are, thinking about, your own sovereignty, and also thinking about the stability of the local currency. But the big challenge you have is around trust. So on day one, it probably needs to be a USD backed, stablecoin, but it should then evolve into a mix of different currencies, and maybe eventually some natural resources.
Interesting.
Sounds good. I mean, I completely agree. I think that part of the criteria are, the time to market, the simplicity of it, the integration with the global, with the global financial system. So I think that indeed, some kind of transitional stablecoin is actually the best idea.
So do you think that each country should be implementing its own stablecoin, or do you think we should see multiple countries working together to implement stablecoins that satisfy most of their needs?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Very good question. I think what Chris said about this, transitionary approach is also what I'll say here. So you probably want to start by building trust. And the way you do that is actually having it centralized. So probably I recommend CeFi at the beginning.
Centralized finance, meaning the central banks are involved?
Exactly. Central banks are involved. Maybe private company-led, but central banks are involved for a single country. So you can get to market fast and everything. But I think very quickly, in order to build trust, it is actually better if you bring a few countries together.
Give me some examples.
So in Africa, for example, you could take two approaches. First, you could say Kenya takes the lead. Why? Because Kenya invented M-Pesa, the biggest mobile money invention ever made. So Kenya could take the lead and then pull together Tanzania, Ethiopia, Uganda, and then issue a stable coin that has more trust because of multiple currencies. Or you could say, interesting, Big Four. What are the big four countries in Africa right now? So Egypt, South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, and they all come together and say, hey, we issue a stable coin. There's a lot of trust that will come with that. And the beauty about it is, if you're going to do it, now is probably the best time. Most of these countries are experiencing devaluation. There's inflationary pressures right now. And so I know it's hard for governments to come together and work together, but these are the four biggest countries in tech as well. So they could come, make a bold statement, and I think it could be revolutionary.
What would you add, Chris?
I haven't much to add. I think it's very tricky with the sovereignty of the different countries involved. So that's the hard part. So I agree. It's kind of a trade-off between doing it now and getting it done versus getting a larger pool of countries involved in a stable coin. So I think that there's some things that need to be thought out here for execution on this, but definitely.
Cryptocurrencies haven't always been at the forefront of environmental considerations, if we can think about Bitcoin, but of course there's been a lot of development and innovation in that as well. How do we keep the environment and ESG concerns at the forefront of thinking about developing these stable coins?
It's something we talked about this morning a little bit. I think it's quite interesting. So you imagine that we said that could have a basket of currencies. But it doesn't have to actually be currencies. They could also be some kind of assets based on environmental protection. For example, the level of CO2, just reducing CO2, increasing oxygen, or other sorts of environmental goals. And those assets could also be part of a stablecoin basket And that would lead then countries, especially if they had some natural resources, to want to keep those and keep those in good shape, because then that basket would actually be worth more.
Interesting. Bunmi and Chris, thank you very much for stopping by the Hop Culture studio here in Davos. We'll continue this conversation next year, I'm sure. And I'm Edie Lush.